Hi everyone, this is Felicity from Good Thread Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to hack the Lydia Naomi bubble frock pattern into this top or also the dress version. This is one of my most favourite sewing patterns of all time, and I've really personalised this version to make it my own. So let's get started. So in this version of the bubble frock, I omitted the scallop edging and I made the straps wider. I love doing this hack in a striped pattern because you can alternate between the horizontal and vertical stripes. This hack also has a really interesting back. It has two straps instead of a single strap on the shoulder. I've tied them at the back, but you can also tie them at the top of the shoulder. Finally, it has this really beautiful crisscross corset style back with elasticized bottom on the skirt panel. So this means there are no buttons or zips required, and you can easily pull on this top and adjust it to your body measurements. So let's get started on cutting out the fabric. So first you're going to cut out the front top bust panel. If you're using a stripe pattern, I like to cut this so the stripes are going horizontal across the body. Now you'll want to cut out the front bottom bust panel, and I like to cut this with the vertical stripes. Next, you'll need to make some adjustments to the back bust panel piece to reduce the width. I simply folded the pattern where the green line arrow is to reduce the width of the pattern to make room for the corset style back. Then you'll cut this pattern piece so that the stripes run vertical. This is likely to be as originally designed with the green line arrow parallel to the selvage. So now we'll cut the back and front skirt pieces. So I'm just using up to the top section here. So what's important to note for this hack is that the back skirt piece has to be 2 centimeters longer than the front skirt piece. This is to make room for the elastic channel that finishes the back. Now looking at the straps. So as mentioned before, you will need 2 straps instead of 1 at the shoulder, and you'll also need 3 corset loops on each side, as well as a long strap to tie the corset back. The corset strap feeds through the loops on each side to create a crisscross style back. So here I've included all the measurements for the 4 shoulder straps, the 1 corset back strap, and the 6 corset back loops. So you can copy these if you like. They will be pretty universal because I've made the straps really long so that you can adjust them to your body shape. But you're welcome to also test that length across your body to see if that works for you. You might also like a shorter or longer style of strap depending on the look that you're going for. The corset back loops and corset strap are prepared very similarly to how you would prepare bias binding. So you iron in 1 centimeter at each side and then iron that in half. For the 4 shoulder straps, you'll just iron that in half with the right sides together, because this will be later sewed and then turned right side out. So now I'm sewing the shoulder straps with 1 centimeter seam allowance. And make sure to pivot at the end and sew along one edge. So using a long blunt object like a chopstick, you can now turn the shoulder strap so that it's right side out. You can also use a loop turner. Make sure to press the seams so they all sit nicely and flat. Now onto the corset strap and corset back loops. So you'll also sew this with about 3 millimeter seam allowance to close those raw edges in. Now you can cut your corset back loop pieces so that you have 6 pieces in total. It doesn't matter if the edges are raw, because these will be encased into the back of the top. So now you have all your strap pieces. I've put the measurements here again in case you need to reference them. So that's 4 shoulder straps, 1 corset back strap, and 6 corset back loops. So as in the original pattern, you'll want to apply fusible interfacing to the bodice shell and the bodice lining. This adds the beautiful structure to the piece, so I definitely recommend not skipping this step. So for the front section of the bodice, this is essentially the same as in Lydia and Naomi's original pattern. So with the right sides together, you'll match the notches of the front and bottom bodice panels, and sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. You'll then press this seam open, so starting at the edges and then working towards the middle. Next up, we'll diverge from the pattern a little and continue with the back pieces. So sew these along the sides. Press those side seams open, and then you'll want to repeat this whole process for the lining, which is exactly the same as the main piece. Using the strap notches as guidance, you'll now attach one of the straps to one of the sides. This can be either the main or lining piece. It doesn't really matter, as this will now be encased between these 2 pieces. You'll also do the same for the back strap piece. And finally, you'll want to attach the 3 corset loops to each side. So I do this by measuring where the center is and putting one of the loops here. And then accounting for the seam allowance, I'll measure 1 cm down from the top and bottom edge, and then pin those last 2 loops 1 cm down. I like to baste stitch these pieces down just so they don't move when we're encasing the 2 pieces together. So lying the main or lining piece on top of the other piece, match up and pin all the edges. You can see here that the straps and the corset loops will all nicely be encased, and when we sew this and turn this right side out, they'll be neatly sitting in the right positions. So we'll sew all along the side and top. At this stage, I'll leave the bottom open just because I want to be able to do some understitching across the top of the top. So understitching is where we sew the seam allowance to the lining side. This just makes sure that the top is really nice and neat and doesn't roll over from the inside. So this is just a fine, about 3 millimeters from the edge, and make sure this is done on the lining side. At this stage, I also like to sew a tag on. This is a tag that I made myself using a Cricut Maker 3 machine, and you can check out my Instagram for this mini tutorial as well. Now we'll go ahead and flip it back so right sides are together so that we can sew that bottom back panel piece. Make sure to end where the side seam allowance is. This is because we'll be attaching the skirt or peplum top piece to the center section. Now, to reduce the bulk at the corners, I like to snip off the corners before turning the top so the right sides are out. You can see the straps are neatly encased, and make sure that you give all these seams a good press. Now you're going to sew the front skirt piece as instructed in the pattern. So that's gathering the top edge using a long stitch. I like to use 2 rows of long gathering stitches, as I just find that that helps control the gathering a bit more. For this front skirt piece, you want to make sure that the gathering lines up to the width of the front bust panel piece. Now back to the back skirt panel. Remember, you'll need this to be 2 centimeters longer than the front skirt panel. This is because we're creating an elastic channel. You'll do this by ironing down 1 centimeter, then ironing this down another 1 centimeter. Now pick a piece of elastic that's width is short enough to fit in this elastic channel. Sew down the elastic channel. Now measure out a piece of elastic that suits your back measurement. So I cut out 31 centimeters in length, and my waist measurement is 72 centimeters in total. You can always adjust this later once you sew that piece of elastic in, and you can hold it up against your back. Using a safety pin, you'll pull the elastic through and sew down one edge using a zigzag stitch. Now that one edge is sewed down, you can pull that safety pin through the remainder of the elastic channel, and you can see that this creates a really nice gathering effect that will be at the back of the top or dress. Now you'll want to sew this down again with a zigzag stitch. A zigzag stitch is important so that the stitch doesn't break as the elastic stretches. So now you'll want to sew the side seams of your back and front skirt panel together. Now you'll use an overlocker or zigzag stitch to finish that raw hem and press that seam so that it sits nicely. I like to press the overlocked edge so it's towards the back of the top or the dress. Now, returning to the bodice piece, you'll want to flip out that raw edge. This is to prepare it to attach the front skirt piece to the front bodice. So now the bodice is attached to the skirt panel, and you can fold this right side out and see what your top looks like. So you can see that the back skirt panel isn't attached, and that's because it has that elasticized channel. We can now overlock that front edge so that it's nice and neat. So now you can try the top on and see how you like the length. If you do like the length, you can simply hem the top as you normally would. However, I wanted 10 centimeters extra in length, and I also wanted another alternating stripe bottom panel. So I cut out 2 rectangles to create this. It's almost like a second tier. So 114 centimeters in width. So this is the exact same measurement as the bottom of the top panel. And then 13 centimeters in length. This is because I want 10 centimeters extra in length, and I also want to account for seam allowance. So that's what that extra 3 centimeters is. Now you'll attach this bottom panel to the end of the top. When I get to those ends, I just like to make sure it all matches up before I sew that side seam allowance. So now you can attach that bottom panel to that edge and overlock that so the edges are nice and neat. Then I like to press that as well as press the hem. And now you're at the final stretch, and you can sew that hem all along the edge. And there you have it. If you're making the top version, that is all done, and you have a beautiful hacked bubble frock top. So stay tuned for the dress version. So where the top ends at the horizontal panel at the bottom, you can see I've had the same panel here on the dress. The horizontal panel in between another tier. I've chosen to just make one more tier on this dress, just because that's how much fabric I had. This rectangle panel, these two rectangular panels, are about 1.5 times this panel. So that's just to give a bit more volume. You can add even more volume if you want a more dramatic effect, and you can add multiple tiers either by timesing them by 1.5 to 2, depending on the amount of volume you want. So the dress is finished off with another horizontal panel at the very bottom. You can see here, and hemmed just like you would the top. Thanks for watching. I hope you liked this tutorial. Make sure you hashtag #GoodThreadsBubbleFrockHack. I'd love to see all your creations. This is the 4th iteration I've made of the bubble frock. So absolutely love this pattern, and make sure you go out and try it.